Welcome to the next chapter, the podcast that reveals how your mindset can be the silver bullet to overcoming your midlife adversity. Join author Robert Miller and his co-author Monica Laurie as they share the collective wisdom from thousands of hours of client discussions and their decades of combined experience to help you prepare for the next chapter in your life. But in order to change your life, you must first change your mindset. It's time to turn how into now as we begin the next chapter.
Hi, and welcome to the Next Chapter podcast, where we delve into one of the 130 plus topics in our new book. You know, if there's one thing Monica and I have learned both personally and through the thousands of hours of face-to-face conversations with our clients over the last 30 years, it's that in life, what happens to us and around us may not be our choice, but how we respond always is. If we change the mindset, it will truly change our life. On today's podcast, titled Why Buying a Home with One of Our Children May Be a Bad Idea, we're going to delve into one of the most challenging and often misunderstood decisions a family can undertake, and that's the intergenerational or extended family lifestyle. Now, we touched on this topic several times throughout the next chapter, and that's because this lifestyle choice appears to be an important but often misinformed trend that's impacting families today. From millennial children and their Gen X parents to their baby boomer grandparents. Realtors across the country are regularly approached by clients who are considering buying a home or going to live with one of their children or another family member, including their parents or grandparents, maybe a sibling, or other extended family member. Why? Well, the reasons vary from trying to help our children who can't save enough to get into the real estate market, or midlifers who feel the need to become caregivers to their parents, to their aging parents who don't want to go to a senior's home because of the stories they've heard about the COVID-19 experience. Now, as I mentioned, this podcast is based on the insights and shared wisdom from those thousands of client conversations Monica and I have been part of, and we hope the information is helpful for our listeners who may be considering the purchase of an intergenerational home with one of their family members, and to reflect on the big why. That's why is it important? Do they feel it's important to do this? And what happens if it doesn't work out? Listen, we totally get the fact that for some, this can be a very fulfilling experience, but it's also one that warrants serious consideration and sound legal advice. Yes, I said legal advice, to avoid some of the speed bumps, or frankly, some pretty serious sinkholes that participants in this endeavor can fall into. One observation from our decades of personal real estate experience is this: the term of an intergenerational home arrangement is typically less than 7 years. Why? Well, simply because life happens. And that's why approaching this topic as if the parties are forming a business partnership is crucial to their long-term health. And this includes their financial, mental, and emotional well-being of those involved, but also their parent and sibling relationships, as well as the associated family politics. Messy? Oh, it can be. And often leaving irreparable scars for generations. Okay, so what's an intergenerational home? Well, let me explain. Today, more than in recent generations, we are experiencing a rebirth of the traditional extended family that's living in a multi-generational home. Historically, it's quite common, as many families immigrating to Canada and the United States over the past 250 years came with their values, their customs, and their culture to their new adopted country. And with the growing number of newcomers in both Canada and the United States in recent years, coupled with the current housing shortage, this trend is expected to continue. As a result, we felt it was important to share these insights. When the first generation arrives in a country, they're usually committed to doing whatever it took to get established, to find work, to educate their children, and most importantly, to buy a home for their family. As the children grew up, they continued to live together until each child was married and the family had helped each of them to get a home of their own. In many cultures, one child would remain in the family home with the parents after they married, and in time become the caregivers to their aging parents. However, by the third generation, that of their grandchildren, this sense of duty had typically changed, with the aging parents being placed in a nursing home and in doing so transferring the role of caregiving to institutions and others so their children could have a life. If that sounds cold, it was. But that had become the trend from the 70s through pretty much 2000. But the 21st century has seen a reversal of this trend. Why? Well, one reason has been the cost of care in these institutions, which seems to be rising faster than the pensions and available savings of those who need this level of care. Also, in a home with two working parents, creating an intergenerational home with their parents who may still be agile and active can save on the daycare costs and ensure the children get the best of care. But at the same time, this can rob their aging parents of the independence and peaceful life in later years that they had so long worked for and were looking forward to. On the other hand, the sandwich generation often find themselves in the dilemma of raising their own children while trying to provide their progressively aging parents with a level of care that homes for the aged typically could not provide. And finally, the exponential rise in the home prices during and since COVID-19 has seen the promise of home ownership slipping away from many young families. And whether out of a sense of duty, a sense of guilt, or a commitment to keep their children and grandchildren from having to move too far away to be able to afford a home of their own, perhaps another province or another state, many aging couples may be considering the sale of their home and investing in a shared family home with one of their children. We're often asked if the intergenerational home is an extended family lifestyle choice, or is it really a family business? And the answer is yes, it's both. And it needs to be treated as such, and for the following reasons. While the intent of the book, the next chapter, is to be a valuable resource, Monica and I, as the authors, strongly recommend the importance of proactively seeking legal advice in all such matters. The small investment for independent professional advice will be the most important decision a parent can make to preserve long-term family unity, both today and after they're gone. Oh, and by the way, we also recommend independent legal advice for all family members who are to be a party of this investment to do this as well. But that's money that we could put toward our purchase, they say. Yes, but if the advice you get is that it's a bad idea for all of the parties involved, some or all of the parties involved, it'll be the least expensive insurance you ever bought. If the parents have financial means and are considering investing with one of the children in the purchase of a suitable intergenerational home, before even starting to shop for the home, the following steps are strongly recommended. If there are other siblings who will not be part of this new intergenerational home and will not be contributing to the purchase of the home or to the ongoing care of their parents, but will be beneficiaries of the parents' estate after their passing, it is strongly recommended that the planning for the parents' estate and for the dissolution of the intergenerational home is a business decision and should be agreed upon by all parties and legally documented in advance before ever starting down the road to shop for a home. In spite of best intentions, just as with matrimonial matters, not all extended family or intergenerational homes go as planned. And it's important to remember that it's typically been several decades since mom and dad and one of their children may have lived together in a shared home. And lots of stuff can pop up and get in the way of the bliss that they envisioned. Remember, we all have baggage, and some of us have not yet let it all go. The parents' independence, the lifestyle choices, and the freedom that being empty nesters may have allowed them means they're probably going to have a period of adjustment. And while many adapt, some don't, some won't, and others simply can't. So for these situations, a shotgun clause, typically found in most business partnership arrangements, should be set up in advance as part of the family's legal agreement, and this would allow for the orderly and least painful dissolution of this partnership. So what's a shotgun clause, you ask? Well, it's like a marriage contract that spells out what the parties agree to, and in the event that they don't agree, won't agree, or can't agree, then it provides for the orderly dissolution of the arrangement and distribution of the assets and accumulated equity on a predetermined basis. Now you'll note that I said predetermined. That means upfront, when cooler heads and fewer outside influencers were weighing in. Messy? You bet. It can be, but doesn't need to tear the family apart if it's done prudently and with the proper advice. Now sadly, the lack of preparedness and the idealistic belief that everything will work out just fine has often led to many painful and unnecessary family feuds. The blame game starts, then sibling rivalry can raise its nasty head, and parties start to take sides, culminating in a near Hatfield and McCoy family war as the tragic outcome. When the parents have a substantial estate, their lawyer may recommend settling the estate in advance of initiating any extended family arrangement. In this scenario, once the value of their estate has been determined, finalized, and communicated with the parties, then and only then is it recommended that the parents and the family member with whom they will be buying the shared home can move ahead with their business agreement. Now, this ensures that when the parents have passed, the family member who shared this as their family home and were the caregiver to the parents will not be required to sell the jointly owned property to settle their parents' estate. Let me illustrate how this happened for Ralph and Joan. Now, the names and situation are not real, but the situations like this are not uncommon. Now, like many of us, Ralph and Joan had a dream. It was not their first marriage, but neither had children when they met, and becoming instant soulmates, they went on to have 2 children together. It was a great match, as Ralph was a dreamer and Joan was a practical and financially astute one, so they balanced each other wonderfully. They had a wonderful marriage, great kids, and things had gone pretty smoothly. Now, fast forward 30 years, Ralph is getting close to retirement and looking forward to moving to a quiet country property with some acreage, a spacious home with a view. And Joan just happened to have inherited a parcel of land from her grandfather, which until now had not really seemed all that valuable. But one day, Rachel, their daughter, approached them with the idea of selling their family home and building an extended family compound on her mother's 60-acre inheritance. Now, Rachel's husband, Martin, was a skilled builder, and over the next 18 months, they designed and built their 6,500 square foot, very custom family compound. Now, their son, Matthew, and his wife, Kate, were also keen to be part of their parents' dream and had been been part of the planning process, but they weren't really there to help with the construction. As the story goes, in spite of the best laid plans and expectations, life happened. Although Kate and Matt moved in, within a year, they were headed back to the city. Why? Well, Kate was a city girl, had never really lived in the country, had come to hate the isolation in that year, and was constantly afraid the coyotes might attack Fifi, her dog. As they had not been financially able to contribute when the home was built and planned to invest later, obviously that wasn't going to happen and would certainly impact Mom and Dad's retirement fund. And then, after 2 short years of living the dream, well, sort of, Ralph and Joan were told that Rachel and Martin had split up and Martin was moving out. And although Ralph and Joan owned the majority of the home, as Rachel and her ex had contributed all their savings and mortgaged the rest in the building of the property, this would need to be dealt with. Now, Joan had been very prudent with her family investments and was able to pay off Rachel's mortgage, and then met with the lawyer to make sure that Martin, who had forfeited his share in the divorce agreement, would not benefit if and when they did ultimately sell the property. But sadly, there are so many stories that end badly, and although the details may differ, the outcome continues to repeat itself over and over. And while the intergenerational home is a wonderful concept, it's much more difficult to maintain over time than it would appear. Now, in Ralph and Joan's case, only 2 years had passed before life happened and their dream was dashed forever. Their children, Rachel and her brother Matthew, had been such great friends growing up, and everything seemed perfect, well, at least in principle. However, their son's wife, Kate, and their daughter's husband, Martin, had not shared in this close-knit past. The epilogue was even more sad. You see, their family home was so unique to their family dream that it was very difficult to sell because of how it was designed. And the $2 million price tag, which Joan and Ralph hoped would help them get back to their old life, well, many months went by before it finally sold for a fraction of what they had been asking, leaving them stressed, broke, and in ill health. And to make matters worse, their children no longer talked to one another and were now both divorced. Well, the concept of building or buying an intergenerational or extended family home can seem ideal for many. The object of telling you about Ralph and Joan's story is to highlight the potential risks and highlight some of the assumptions that are often glossed over but can impact the success of such an adventure. What Monica and I have learned through the experiences of families like this, who have bravely embarked on this journey, is simply that life as a couple can be challenging enough. But when additional adults and their children are added into the equation, it can create the potential for way too many variables and personalities to successfully manage. And unlike when the children were growing up, this new arrangement is supposed to be a democracy. But over time, it becomes less clear who's really in charge. Even with sound legal advice, all relationships are made up of imperfect humans who, like us, have the potential to change our minds. Joan and Ralph were deeply invested, emotionally as well as financially, in their castle on the hill. As it had been Joan's family generational property, it was particularly heartbreaking to think that they would have to sell it and give up their extended family dream. Watching their grandchildren growing up had been part of their growing old plan, and now that was torn away from them as well. In summary, preparedness is the key. While the proceeds of a parent's estate are typically not distributed until their passing, before investing in any intergenerational property, all the beneficiaries to Mom and Dad's estate should be advised by the parents, with the lawyer present, and preferably with all potential beneficiaries also there as well. Oh, by the way, the will is not a negotiation. This meeting is simply to be told about the firm decision that was mom and dad's to make alone, that being their will. Sharing it is a courtesy and a necessary step before moving ahead. But this could highlight a potential storm ahead if this meeting did not go well. But then again, better that they know now rather than later. And as I mentioned earlier, settling their estate with the other beneficiaries in advance protects the family member they're investing with so that on their passing, that family home is not ripped away from the caregiver and their children. You know, the greatest wish of most parents is that their legacy be a cohesive family who will continue to come together long after they're gone to maintain the traditions and build new memories. But from the experience of most families who've gone down this intergenerational home route, the result tends to be quite the opposite. Despite the best laid plans and family meetings, in hindsight, siblings and other beneficiaries seldom feel their share of the estate was fair or equitable. And while each family dynamic is different, the last word on this topic should be prudence, and to realistically assess the risks and benefits to all parties. Yep, benefits, including the impact of the legacy mom and dad want to leave behind. Although family unity over time is typically the goal, when we pass, for many families, the money and property left behind tends to be the great divider. But that's a topic for another podcast. With that prudent and well thought out lifestyle plan you've developed with your partner or spouse, you're able to make the right decision for yourselves. Remember, in life, what happens to us and around us may not be our choice, but how we respond, not react, always is. Change the mindset, and you will change your life. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope this was helpful. Feel free to give us a call, 1-855-755-BOOK. That's 1-855-755-2665. And give us a thumbs up or subscribe so you don't miss any of our next chapter episodes. So until then, remember, as one door in life closes, another opens. Change the mindset, change your life.
Thanks for tuning in to the next chapter. If this podcast was interesting or helpful, please share it with friends. And be sure to click the thumbs up to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Remember, if you change your mindset, you can change your life.